Happy New Year and welcome to episode 68 on the Live Blissed Out podcast. Did you know that the first truly portable computer was developed by Adam Osborne in 1981? The Osborne 1 is recognized as the first true laptop computer. It had a 5-inch display, weighed approximately 25 pounds, and cost around $1,800. We've come a long way since then, haven't we? Hello, action takers. Welcome to Live Blissed Out, a podcast where I have inspirational and informational conversations with business owners and subject matter experts to help us get the scoop and the lowdown on a variety of topics. Tired of hesitating or making decisions without having the big picture? Want to be in the know? Then this is the place to go. I'm your host, Marissa Houston, helping achieve bliss through awareness and action. Thanks for joining me. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Joining me is Dylan Oglin, owner of Oglin Consulting, LLC. After growing his digital marketing agency into a 7-figure agency, generating over $1 million in sales annually, he turned his focus to helping other people start and grow their own hyper-profitable digital agency. Dylan undoubtedly believes that anybody can start and build their own digital agency that will allow them to have more freedom and live a life with purpose and meaning. And he wants to give everyone the tools to do just that. To learn more, visit dylanoglin.com. It's the new year, and you're probably considering new ways to promote your business and start out with a bang. I'm excited to announce my collaboration with veteran YouTuber Andrea Chapman to show you how to start your own podcast and YouTube channel. If you've always wanted to learn how to be a podcaster and YouTuber, but feel intimidated, then this is the course for you. Ace Your Virtual Business is focused on action, community, and effectiveness. Our initial launch is limited to 15 students to ensure that you receive the personalized support you will need. Stay tuned for more details or feel free to send me a message at speakpipe.com/LBOVM. Dylan, I am so looking forward to our conversation today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here.
We're going to be talking about a topic that I think you are very familiar with, and that is the laptop lifestyle. And I wanted to begin by understanding better what exactly does that mean, because we got visions in our head about sitting on a beach, sitting with our laptops and just doing whatever we want, whenever we want. And it sounds wonderful, but running a business is still a huge responsibility and there are things that have to happen. So when we say laptop lifestyle, what do we mean by that?
Essentially, to me, it's just being able to work when you want, where you want, on what you want. Kind of having more freedom with your work. It's not about working less necessarily, because I think a lot of people get bored if they ended up not having a project to work on or a business to work on or something that they're moving the world forward with. For me, I have experience, I guess, with going to an office and being stuck in an office and wanting to get out and travel the world and being stuck and not being able to do that. And I think a lot of people, they end up with that. They end up kind of, stuck in the daily grind and not liking what they're doing. They hate the whole 9-to-5 thing. And it's kind of working a different way. You're still maybe working the same amount of time, but you're where you want to work so you can travel and work. That's where the laptop thing comes in, but also working on what you want and when you want. So if you wake up some morning, you want to go for a hike, you go for a hike. But if you wake up some morning, you want to jump into your work, then you do that too. It's not, I got to go to the office tomorrow morning at 9:00.
Yeah. And what's so wonderful about that, Dylan, is that we can. I grew up in a generation where we did not have that option. We didn't even have laptops. I mean, I went to college, I had no computer. So we're talking about DOS.
Oh.
And going to the library and still looking things up manually. And that was the world we lived in. We never imagined that we would have cell phones and laptops and internet. None of that existed. So this is a world that gives us choices now. And particularly in the times that we're in, where we're almost forced to have to use technology now. And that can be a very scary thing for some people because they are used to that traditional way of doing things, going to meet somebody for coffee, going to a live networking event and talking to somebody one-on-one. And now it's actually scary for some people to say, what do you mean I can't see you in person? I have to Zoom? What is that? Believe it or not, this year, so many people have finally started to realize that that option is something that is a very positive thing in many ways, and that they just have to kind of shift their mindset and not be so afraid of it and take advantage of the benefits that it offers, don't you think?
100%. For years, the definition of work overall has been changing, not just working when you want, where you want, not just that, but meeting in person, stuff like that. People working at home. You go back 20 years ago and nobody worked at home. It was really, really weird for people to work at home. And over time, it became more and more acceptable, less and less of a taboo. There wasn't this stigma. Up until this year with COVID, there still was this extreme stigma of you work at home? Like, what is that like? But the technology was getting better over the years. And I have seen this change coming for the longest time. And then it took COVID to really ramp it up to 10, where now everybody was forced to work at home. And I think the most powerful thing was, I mentioned that stigma where anyone older than the millennial generation, I'm like at the end of the cutoff of being a millennial, but anybody older would look at me and be like, you work at home or you travel and work? That's so weird. And it was because they had just never experienced it. They had never done a Zoom call, or why would you have a webcam? Why not just go meet somebody in person, or traveling across the country to go do a business deal? That was just the way it was. And then everybody was forced to work at home. And now everybody's like, oh, it's actually not that bad. Actually, there's a lot of benefits to it. There's a lot of good that comes out of it. I'm not wasting 2 hours a day in traffic. If I want to get up from my desk and take a walk, there's nobody looking at me weird. Why aren't you working in your office? It's cheaper. There's just so many benefits to it. It can be scary. I can understand that. But the pros way outweigh the cons. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah. And I hear it all the time. People are saying now, I am saving so much money on gas, on time, on coffees. Just think about it. You got to meet somebody, you got to get dressed, you get in your car, you go to a location, you spend an hour, you drive to another place. It's just not feasible anymore. It's not practical in the sense that you've got to meet a lot of people, especially when you're trying to build your business. And so you got to find ways to get your message out and connect with people more from a community standpoint rather than one-on-one, not because you're trying to be impersonal, but just because there's a set amount of time you have in a day and you got to be as efficient as you can with it, right?
Yeah, that's spot on.
How do we work smarter? A lot of us are traditional about what we've been doing in the past or how we've been doing it. That when it comes to trying a new approach or changing our perspective on things, it's difficult for people. We're talking about your generation, which is the millennials. I'm a Gen Xer. And I find that in my generation, we obviously grew up with none of the technology. And then all of a sudden it switched. At a certain age, we just all of a sudden got inundated with all this stuff. Whereas you kind of eased into it more. You didn't necessarily have it all when you were born, but pretty much when you were starting in your teens, you started to see the shift happening. And so I think that our generations, what we have in common is we've been able to experience the change and start to utilize it and learn it and apply it into our lives. But that's not easy for a lot of people, right? Technology still scares them, and change in general, just trying to approach things differently. So how do we do better so that we're doing things more efficiently?
There's a term I like to use, continuous destruction of perceived self. And what that is, it's all about mindset. You don't want to think of yourself as this rigid, solid personality or person. You wouldn't want to think of yourself oh, I'm bad at sales calls. You're putting out into the universe that Dylan is bad at sales calls. I'm just using that as an example. You want to think of yourself as malleable, as constantly becoming a different version, a better version of yourself. So when things change, which the world's going to continue to change, It's going to continue to change faster and faster. Zoom is the big thing right now. 10 years from now, I can guarantee you it's going to be something different. I have no idea what it's going to be, but things are going to change faster and faster. And by thinking of yourself that way, when things change, you're not scared of it. You embrace new technology. You view yourself as becoming a different version, a better version of yourself each day. Just constantly accepting change, realizing that the world's getting better. Then you don't fear it as much and you embrace it and get better and better.
I do like that way of thinking, which is always striving to be a better version of yourself. I feel like every decade, you're a new person. It's almost like you shed your skin like a snake or something, and then you start reinventing yourself. And I like to think in a better way. I think we just get wiser. We learn through experience. We become better versions of ourselves. And if we're not, then that's what we should strive for. And by looking at it from that perspective, then you're not so stuck in your ways and you say, how can I improve? If that's your focus, then you don't fear it so much because you're really looking at it as bettering things rather than fearing change, because that change thing, a lot of times it's based on fear, right?
Oh, that's 100%. Especially like Gen Xers and baby boomers and stuff. When they talk about computers or working at home or like setting up a webcam, they're scared of it. It's different. It's a change. But if you embrace change and you always are thinking of yourself as changing and becoming a better version of yourself, there is no fear because you're like, oh, this is how I'm going to become a better version of myself. This is how my business is going to become a better version of my business. My business is changing. Me personally, we're constantly changing. And by changing that perspective, there is no fear and you're better prepared, whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't know. Talk to me 10 years from now, whenever we're the generation in our 40s, but I see that millennials are more adaptive to change. Gen X is the generation before millennials. My brother's a Gen X and he still writes checks, like actual, like physical checks when he pays a bill. And I'm like, dude, I've never written a check in my life.
Oh my goodness. Once technology came in, it's like, wow, this is awesome.
It's a better way of doing things, but he's a smart guy. He just changed. It's different. It's scary. I don't know if this like happens with every generation. Talk to me 10 years from now and see maybe millennials are scared of all the changes in the world. I don't know, but you have to accept it. You realize that that's the way it is. And 99% of the time it's for the better.
I think there's two reasons behind that. For example, with a Gen Xer, they probably have lived more than half their life before all this technology hit in. So they were so used to things. I mean, think about it. When you build a habit and you get so used to something, it's much harder to shift. Whereas when you're a millennial, it happened very early on, usually. And so by then, you're still able to adapt a lot quicker. The other thing I think that's happening is it seems like technology is moving faster than ever before. So each decade or even every 5 years, so many more new changes have taken place. Whereas back in my generation, it took a really long time before one new thing would show up. And it was just one thing. Now, all of a sudden, you've got 100 million apps and, all of these new things that come up every day. And you're going, what? I could do this. What is this? Now it's to the point where our brains are short circuiting because there's just too many choices. We didn't have that before. It came more gradually. So I think those are the reasons. It just gets more difficult for some people. But it's really funny. I have a niece who is a millennial and she doesn't like technology. And I'm the one teaching her how to use social media or use technology. And she doesn't want to get on it. And she's just more traditional. She likes to go on hikes and be in nature and just get away from all that. And I'm the one that is doing more of the digital stuff. So I find it quite fascinating because, again, we generalize, but there are exceptions to the rule, even millennials that don't want to embrace technology. So I guess it just depends on the individual too, for sure. But again, we're speaking in general terms. In today's world, especially in technology, there's a lot of noise now. If you think about it with COVID, this forced us to go digital. I mean, this is really where the rubber meets the road. Everybody who was opposed to it and refused to Zoom because they wanted to have that live coffee, now they don't get that choice. Now they have to be on. So what I'm noticing now is there's a lot of noise, Dylan. There's so many people now doing lives. Everybody's talking to you. Everybody wants you to watch their show, get on their webinar. And there's so much confusion out there. And the other thing that's happening is that there are so many people offering the same thing. So think about it. Insurance agents, financial planners, realtors, they're everywhere. As business owners, how do we niche? How do we stand out from the crowd so that people will reach out to us for a specific area of expertise and look to us as the definitive person they want to work with in that particular area? Because again, niching is scary. People don't want to niche because they feel like they're discouraging people from doing business with them.
It varies on whatever your product or service is, on how specifically you niche down. In my personal example, I own a digital marketing agency, and it would be almost impossible for me to build the world's best marketing agency or digital agency. Probably not going to happen. It's probably going to take me a long time to do it, 20, 30 years to possibly build the world's best digital agency. However, by niching down, you can very quickly become one of, if not the best in the world at a very specific niche. So I probably will never have the country or the world's best digital marketing agency, but I could pretty quickly be the best in the world at specifically helping plumbing and heating companies get more install projects with digital marketing in Pennsylvania. I'm getting really specific there. And what happens is if you have a podcast, then obviously you need to take a different approach. If you have a clothing company, you need to take a different approach, but you need to think about it the same way. Diving deeper with that plumbing and heating company example, when you're reaching out to those potential clients, it makes the conversation better because you're not saying, hey, we're a digital marketing company. That's not going to sell anybody. But if you go to a plumbing and heating company and you say, hey, we specifically help you, plumbing and heating companies, get more of exactly what you want. Notice I said get more install projects. I didn't just say get more customers. And I know this because with my agency, one of the verticals we work in is plumbing and heating companies. So I know what they want. I'm telling them I help specifically you. And I know that you don't want repair projects. You want install projects because you make more money there. So I've already differentiated myself. I'm not just some random marketing agency. I'm telling this person I specifically help you. And I've already proven that because I know a little bit about what they want. They want install projects, not repair projects.
But essentially, you're speaking their language.
I'm speaking their language. The most important thing with sales, everybody's looking for a solution to a problem. If you can identify their problem better than they can, if you could define it better than they can, that person will automatically assume that you have the solution. So the plumbing and heating company, they might be thinking, I want to grow my business. I need more customers. That's the limit of their thought because they're not marketing experts. They're plumbers. They put in heating furnaces or AC units. Like that's what they do. They're not marketing experts. But if I talk to them and I say, you actually don't want more customers. If I set up a great marketing campaign and you're getting all these repair calls, you're going to be working all the time, barely making any money. People are going to be complaining. Repairs are difficult. They take forever. What you actually want is install projects because there's a higher profit margin. It's simpler. It's easier. People typically know what they want, et cetera, et cetera. I just defined the problem better than they can. So they just assume that I have the answer, that I have the solution. Now, how you niche varies on whatever your product or service is. So listeners out there, you need to figure that out. But power of niching down is that converting customers or getting listeners, you're speaking directly to them and you stand out in the marketplace.
And I think that that's a mindset thing too, because people are afraid of it because they feel like they're going to lose opportunities to help other people. When in reality, if you look at it from the perspective of the person you're serving, if you come across as an expert and know their business inside and out and can be successful with them, then you're actually opening up doors for other opportunities. It's not shutting doors, it's opening doors.
Absolutely. And the second thing I wanted to really focus on is that you're never going to be the best at doing everything. Think about Chevy, right? So they make, relatively speaking, cars for middle-class America. But if you're a billionaire, you're not going to buy a Chevy. You're going to buy a Rolls Royce or whatever. If you're in poverty, you're not going to buy a Chevy because you can't afford it. It can go either direction, right? So even Chevy, this massive company that, you think that they would have everything covered, they don't have 100% of the market covered. They maybe only have 40% of the market covered, but that's okay. And so many business owners, they come in and they think my product or service needs to be for 100% of everybody. And the truth is that there is absolutely no product or service that is good for 100% of everybody. Using that quick example, even if you had a car that was free, you literally gave people a vehicle that was good quality. You gave people a brand new free vehicle. There's still like 10% of the market that would be like, I'm good. I don't want that. I want a Ferrari or I want a Mercedes. You can't create a product or service that can serve 100% of everybody, but you can pretty easily create a product or service that is the best in the world at a particular niche.
Going back to that best in the world thing, it's really being able to specialize and serve to the highest capacity that you're able to because you know that audience, because you have already gone through that over and over again with other businesses that are similar, and you can serve them in the best way possible. Whereas it's almost like you're shortchanging them when you're trying to serve too many people. Have you ever been to like a restaurant where they hand you that menu and it looks like a directory?
Yeah, it's like 1,000 items.
And then I wonder, how can these people be really good at giving me anything delicious here when they just serve so many different things on the menu? I actually respect restaurants that have a very limited menu, but every single thing on there is delicious, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah, I could relate to that completely. Starting is so difficult for many people. And I'm not talking about just the idea of starting, because all of us have ideas and we get excited and we're like, I'm going to do something. It's the actual execution of it. And partly the challenge is people are looking for perfection, or perhaps they're comparing themselves to other people that are successful. And oftentimes when we do that, we forget that the person got there by starting small. I mean, very rarely do you see somebody just take off and they have everything lined up perfectly. They've had to go through some challenges or hiccups along the way. And if you even look at some of the, let's say, really popular YouTubers or people who give out courses or coaches or anything, if you look at the old stuff that they put out, it's almost laughable. Like you're going, I can't believe that that's who they were, 5 years ago or whatever, because they started somewhere. And I think that we're fearful of that. And we just tend to look at them now because that's how we got to know them in terms of what they're doing now and their success. And then we think, I got to have all that. I got to have the best lighting. I got to have the best equipment, all this stuff. And we spend years trying to put all this together and never launch anything. And then we don't get paid. And in the meantime, we're spending money and spending money. So I want to talk a little bit about how we should focus on just starting, like doing something that will give us some revenue so that then we can set ourselves up for success and growth.
There's 3 things that I would mention when it comes to starting. Kind of like with the niching, how you niche kind of depends on whatever your product, your service is. If you have a podcast, you're going to have to take a different approach than, say, if you're building a digital marketing agency. The best thing you can do when it comes to starting out is start with an audience of 1. This is particularly if you have a podcast, a YouTube channel, blog, whatever. This would not apply to a digital marketing agency. An audience of 1 is simply you. This is the best guess at product market fit you could possibly get. So solve your own problems. Scratch your own itch. If you can develop a product or a service, a podcast, whatever, that is something you wanted in the marketplace. Say you wanted a podcast to talk to athletes about their daily routine. Literally, I just created that off the top of my head. There might be one out there. I don't know. If that is something you're sitting there and you're like, man, I really would like to have a podcast to talk to athletes about their daily routine, and you can't find it out there in the marketplace, then you know there's an audience of 1, and that's you. And if there's an audience of 1, there's probably an audience of other people like you. So that is a good rule of thumb. Doesn't apply to everybody. If you're doing it with a digital marketing agency, it ain't going to work for you. But if you're doing it with a podcast or a clothing line or something like that, it can certainly work. Second thing I wanted to mention is you're talking about equipment and whatnot. Realize that, and this goes for pretty much every business, every category, the first version will suck. It's going to be terrible. Your first YouTube video, your first podcast, if you have a clothing line, your first designs are going to suck. They're going to be terrible. Your first podcast is going to not be good. Your first sales call, if you have an agency and you're doing sales calls or whatever, it's not going to be good. You're going to be bad. It's going to take multiple iterations, constantly improving before you get good. And realize whenever you see somebody that has a great YouTube channel or an awesome podcast, they're probably a couple hundred iterations in. That's just the way it is. And the only way for you to get there is to do the first one. You have to do the first one, and then the second one, and then the third, and so on, and continuously improve. But just realize that it's going to be terrible.
I know that sounds pretty obvious, but so many of us love to learn, and that's why books are so popular. We love to read them. They give us not only information, but they give us hope. They give us inspiration to say, I want to do this, and here are all the steps that I need to take. And so we get all excited. We read the book from start to finish. We talk about the author and tell everybody else, this was transformative for me. But oftentimes the people that say that have stopped with the book. Like they read it, but they never actually apply the principles. They're just happy to know it. And the thing is, when they actually get to the point where they apply some of those principles and then they kind of stumble, then all of a sudden their perspective is different. Like, oh my gosh, why doesn't it work perfectly like it said or whatever? That's because you have to apply it. You have to practice. And what works for one person doesn't necessarily work the same way for somebody else. And so think about a simple recipe. How many times do you see reviews online about a recipe and some people will give it 5 stars and some people 1? And then it's really funny. The one that give it 1 stars, they'll say, well, I didn't follow the recipe exactly. I changed it to this and that.
There's your sign.
Follow the recipe first. And then if you don't like it, then adjust it. But don't just go around changing everything and then wondering why you failed in the first place. So that application piece, Dylan, I think is the piece that we miss a lot because we think that just by absorbing the information, somehow everything's going to be okay now that I know it. But knowing and doing are two totally different things, right?
100%.
So you just got to start with something. You got to take the knowledge and apply it. And then you tweak it as you go, but you've got to start. And I think that is the key, because if we don't start and we overanalyze everything and try to perfect it and get it on paper and modify it over and over in our brains, but we don't actually put it to work, we're just delaying the inevitable. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you do that, you're still going to have to start. And then you wasted all this extra time and you probably would have learned lessons quicker if you had just put it into practice. So I think that that's so important.
As quickly as possible, you want to get to that 50th iteration or that 100th podcast or that 100th video and continuously improve yourself as fast as possible. You want to get there. One other thing when it comes to starting is selling before you build. If you have a podcast, this is not going to apply for you. If you have a digital marketing agency, this would apply to you. You have a product or a service, this is probably going to apply to you. And with that, you need to take the approach of proving product market fit as fast as possible. You don't want to spend years and years and years developing your service, building your website, getting a nice logo, etc., without actually having a paying customer. You don't want to build a training program for 6 months to a year without proving that there's actual product market fit. Most people have heard that term, your MVP, proving your product market fit, getting that minimal viable product or service out there. But most people don't actually put it into practice. And the hack or cheat to that is to sell before you actually build. So if you have a training program and you think, I'm going to teach people how to start a podcast, some random example I just created, actually reach out to whoever your target market is and actually try to sell them on it, and not just ask them, hey, would you use this product or service? Because people will lie to you. Just to be nice, people are like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Once you have it built, please let me know. No, actually get somebody to give you money. Actually get them to hand you a credit card. Actually process a credit card transaction and get money from them. And if it's something like you're building a training program on how to start a podcast, and you get people and then you don't end up building the training program, just refund them. No harm, no foul. That's okay. But you don't want to actually spend 2 years developing the training program and then start to go out into the marketplace and realize that there is actually no desire in the marketplace. But if you get people who are actually giving you money before you even have the product built or the service ready, then you have product market fit.
I always think of the credit card as a voting card.
Good way to think of it. I like that.
When you pay for something, you just gave your vote. You're saying, I approve, because that's the biggest compliment, is to give somebody money and say, I really like your product, right? I mean, that's the gist of it, because people want to spend money wisely. And you want to know that when you're spending it, you're going to enjoy the product, something that you expected it to be, and then some. So when somebody takes the time to do that, that is such an honor. And you have to take that super seriously. But at the same time, say to yourself, wow, that's validation. That really means that that person really wants this. And that just makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you are giving something of value.
Absolutely. And this is kind of like a back end benefit. It forces you to build the minimal version of your product or service. So say you sell that training program to teach somebody how to start a podcast, and you tell everybody like, hey, I'm going to take the training live in 3 weeks. Well, now you have a deadline, and deadlines are the best way to get something done. So now you're going to cut all the unnecessary fluff with that training program, in this example, to get it live, to deliver the training program to those people. And then you can actually get feedback from the marketplace. And if people are like, hey, it seems like there's nothing that tells me how to actually get good audio. It's just an example. Well, okay, then yeah, I need to add that training part to it and then rely on their feedback.
Absolutely. And because we're looking at it from our own perspective, there are things that we just miss, that we can't see, that other people will catch right early on and be able to tell you honestly, so that then you can improve it for the next group of people. So I just love that approach. Dylan, talk to us about who you serve and how people can get more information about you.
Like I mentioned, my education company, which is just under my personal name, DylanOgline.com, OGLINE. People can go to my website and join the waiting list whenever I am starting to accept new students into that program. I put out a free ebook, DylanOgline.com/6, all spelled out, SIX. And that is my book, 6 Steps to a Six-Figure Agency. The program is called Agency 2.0. And essentially, my goal with the program is to be able to take anybody, even if they knew nothing about marketing, they knew nothing about starting their own business, and teach them everything they need to know during the course of the 6 weeks to start their own digital marketing agency with the goal of hitting 6 figures.
That's fantastic, Dylan. This was such a wonderful conversation. It really helped us kind of just talk about the things that we need to be thinking about to do better, always improve, get out there and reach the people that we need to help. Because the bottom line is, if we're not out there helping people, we're missing out on opportunities to provide value. And that's really what it's all about. Thanks, Dylan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for this episode of Live Blissed Out. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Dylan Ogland for being my guest. If you have a question or comment for a future episode, all you have to do is go to speakpipe.com/LBOVM or click the link in the show notes to leave a brief audio message. If you find value in our show, please visit liveblисsedout.com to reach out, subscribe, and share on social media. This show is made possible through listeners like you. Thank you. So long for now, and remember to keep moving forward.